Welcome to the city of frost and fire. Discover the authentic stories of the extraordinary people that define our north of normal metro. I'm Conrad Fargo, and this is the Fargo Five. Today we've got Joe Deutsch, who is a professor of physical education and coaching at NDSU, publicly elected Fargo Park Board Commission for 18 years, and of course, he is known as Sylvester J. Fox, the managerial extraordinaire for 27 years. Hello, Joe.
Conrad, how are we doing today?
Very good. So I want to start with the Park Board Commission because that interested me a little bit. Previous guest of the show, Zoe Absey, is now your, what do you say, your colleague? Your
newest commissioner, newest colleague. Absolutely.
Okay, and you've been doing it for 18 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting piece of my portfolio, if you want to call it.
I want to ask you kind of the same question I asked her because it's nice to get kind of a second opinion on the same question. Why? What was it? What was the very kernel? What I want to know is, do you remember or do you recall? What was it that put into your mind, I'm going to go become the park commissioner?
Sure.
Like, where did that even start? 20 years ago. I mean, that was back in 2008?
That's a great question. I'll tell you, I won't try to go back too far, but to the backstory is I'm born and raised in North Fargo, right over by Elephant Park. Rode my bike over to El Zagle to golf, dragging my golf clubs behind the back of my bike. I rode my bike through the path along the river to go over and play baseball at Mickelson growing up as a kid. So parks and recreation in Fargo was a big part of my life growing up. Go to college, become a physical education teacher, get involved with recreation in that context of teaching physical education by day and recreational activities for kids by night. Did my master's, did my PhD, get my job at NDSU, and one of my colleagues and mentors who was a professor at NDSU who was a recreation professor, Dr. Barnhart, Tom Barnhart, he had been on the park board for what was 24 years. So If you think about that, that's like almost 50 years between the two of us because I came on as he was coming off. But he really encouraged me to run for park board. It ends up like working very well with my job. I have a service appointment as part of my contract at NDSU to do things for the community, for the profession.
Oh wow!
In the
so
wheelhouse
NDSU, and so you're there studying for your PhD. You already have your master's.
Oh,
you're there.
No, I have my PhD. I'm Dr. Deutsch.
Oh, okay, this is when you get because you.
And I've been there for this. I'm starting my 20th year here. So
no, but when you become when you were going to become the commissioner, I'm trying to. I really want to hook onto that and really focus in on how did that happen. So your professor, another doctor, or you weren't a doctor at this time? Where were you in life?
I was a year away from finishing my doctorate, but I was an instructor. Yeah, so I was.
And so as part of the doctorate.
Yep.
NDSU tells you, hey, you need to join the community somehow. You can't just be in a room alone getting your doctorate. You got to be out there and doing something.
Right.
And commissioner is as good as any option, what else was on your plate?
It's in the wheelhouse, right? So now the full-time staff at the park district out to me. Do you have students that could do this sports sampler class for hey, we need people to work at the golf course this summer. Do you have students? And of course, anybody in that physical education, coaching, recreational realm, those are the types of summer jobs they want to do. Working the baseball for kids, and so it's a win-win situation for myself and for the park district and for my relationship with NDSU and my students and myself, because I'm helping them get jobs. I'm helping the park district place people that they already know have that background, interest, and expertise.
And this was your doctorate advisor he sat you down and he said, "Look, Joe, here's the plan. You're gonna run for
I'm
park
coming off this year. And you're gonna run."
Okay, and you just like right away you said yes, or you had to think about it.
I had to think about it, but at that point, I had made a decision about 4 years before that I was going to be an elementary physical education teacher for the rest of my life, and I'm about to embark on being a college professor with a PhD for the rest of my life right now, 5 years later. So I'm already into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah.
And I'm figuring, hey, if I might as well continue to explore other areas of this deep end because, I mean, I haven't drowned yet, and I'm actually enjoying this and finding some things that are of extreme interest to me.
What was the process of campaigning like? So it was your first time running and your first time won? By what kind of a margin? Were you up against stiff competition? I mean, why did Dr. Deutsch win as opposed to somebody else? How did that?
Well, I'm not gonna lie to you. My family has been in Fargo for since 1950.
Yeah.
So, and my dad and his brothers grew up and went to Shanley. He's got cousins that all went there. There's
and you were part of that North Fargo thing.
Yes, there are
that whole North Fargo thing.
North Fargo. I mean, the footprint of the city has grown threefold since I first ran.
Absolutely.
And yard signs were a big thing back then. Now it's Facebook or X posts as opposed to yard signs.
But when you were running, this was 2008 when you were running, and okay.
And so I'm ordered up these yard signs, and I filled the back end of my van with them, and I just drove around town at that time and just found locations that looked to be and I went and banged on the door and introduced myself and asked them if they'd be willing to house my yard sign for it. And it's funny when somebody says yes, I would be willing to do that, and they're kind enough to do so. It still doesn't mean that when they mow their lawn and they remove it out, that they necessarily remember to put it back in. So I'm driving around on a daily basis, like a figure eight through Fargo, looking to make sure that my yard signs are still up. Maybe it blew away. Maybe somebody stole it.
Yeah.
Go knock on the door and go through that process again.
So it sounds to me like you got to know people and then do the work.
Yeah.
But you put those two together, and anybody could be the park commissioner, perhaps.
100% what you just said. It's relationships and just getting to know more people and finding connections is definitely the way to be successful in this world. I mean, you got to have some content knowledge, but at the end of the day, it's really making connections.
What I would like to know is how this all ties in, speaking of connections, with Below Zero Wrestling. You are maybe the fourth Below Zero Wrestling guest that I have. Nick, talk about knowing people. Nick Stokey is a very good friend of mine. I used to get coffee with him for a very long time. When did you get connected with him? So, because it says here, managerial extraordinaire for 27 years. Now, Below Zero Wrestling is only like 5 years old, right? So
like 3.
How did you get introduced to Mr. Stokey, and how did that all come together? How did those pieces fit?
Yeah, so I like I said, I'm old, right? So I've been doing this since 1997. Okay. I grew up as a kid. Let me be brutally honest with you. I grew up as a kid, and professional wrestling was the greatest thing ever in the world, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to be a part of it. And I wasn't big enough to become a professional wrestler.
You're a pretty big guy.
I am now, but I was probably 60 pounds skinnier back then, even though I am 6'5".
You're tall.
Proportionally put it on. But,
okay.
But anyway, and so I ended up going to college and ended up meeting and marrying my first wife, and had a son, right away in 1996.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be like 2 years into college, and then things didn't work out, and I really wasn't handling that well, and I went to see a counselor, and she said to me, like, to help me, she was like, I'd cope with the idea of not seeing my son half the time.
Yeah.
She's like, what is one thing that you wanted to do in life that you conceded you were never going to do because of the fact that you got married and had a kid at such a young age?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I was be a part of professional wrestling. She said, well, on every other weekend you don't get to have your son, you figure it out. And so this is, again, the beginning, the dawn of the internet. So I can go on, with the dial-up noise and whatever, and log in, and I can find some web pages in the cities that list dates and places that wrestling shows are going to be. But that's about it. And so I had to come up with my what we call gimmick, which is Sylvester J. Fox, managerial extraordinaire.
So you come up with that gimmick first.
Yeah. Better known in the
your
world,
plan is to get into the wrestling world? I mean,
so I'm a professional wrestling manager like Bobby the Brain Heenan was, or Jimmy Hart was.
Okay.
Or those are two of the biggest names people remember, Jim Cornette. And so I basically accompany my wrestlers to to the ring, and I tell them that, and I tell the world that I'm here to look out for his well-being, because people are going to take advantage of him or cheat, and to take his opportunity away from him. And the truth of the matter is, I go out there and try to create more opportunity for him and cheat somebody else out of their opportunity while we're out there. So, so I started doing that in 1997. I managed the Iron Sheik at the Red River Valley Fair in 1999. If you remember the Iron Sheik, he's the guy that Hulk Hogan beat to win the championship belt the very first time in WWF.
So I want to slow back down, and I want to, just like we did with the commissioner thing, I want to get a hook on like the very kernel, because so somebody's watching this, they're like, Joe Deutsch, this is an interesting guy. I want to be just like him when I grow up. I want to be Fargo commissioner, and I want to be in professional wrestling. We already told them how to get on the park board, so that's great. Yep. Now I want to tell the listener how do they break in. So your therapist is like, go break into it.
Sure.
And so you just started Googling, is what you said? You started Googling where's professional wrestling, and then you just showed up and you said, hey guys, I'm Sylvester J. Fox.
.com back then. I don't even think Google existed in 1997. Seriously.
Yeah.
Or 1996, I guess it would have been. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that would be effective anymore, because but I mean, when I figured it out, I mean, I had to drive to Minneapolis. There was no professional wrestling in Fargo or anywhere near here. Like everything else, entertainment wise, we've got way more opportunities now than we did before with entertainment type things. I mean, but anyway, but yeah, I put my gimmick together, and I went there, and I
built the gimmick first.
Yeah, and I went to. Yeah, I've got pictures to prove it. It doesn't look anywhere near as cool as it does today, as far as my suits and stuff go. But I had one of those like phones, not quite the Zach Morris, but a legit flip phone that I had clipped on my belt, because that was what the cell phone was at that time.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I go and I talk to the promoter of this wrestling, and they proceed to tell me that you can't just become a manager. Like, you need to be trained. You need to be trained how to be safe. You need to be trained how to what we call take a bump. And so there was a great couple of guys, an uncle and a nephew. They called themselves the Hellraisers, and they worked with me before
and
after the shows.
Who hooked you up with these guys?
The promoter.
And how did you get a hold of the promoter?
I went right.
You just walked right up to him.
To the show.
You walked right up.
I got there 4 or 5 hours before the show was going to start. But yeah, I showed up there and said, looking for the guy who's in charge of this place.
I think so. This Fargo Famous is section. The whole idea is, how did you get where you are? And I think the recurring theme that we see is, the world is open to people who just walk up and do things, right? Like, you just gotta walk up and ask.
You just gotta be willing to do it. And
and that was 27 years ago. Okay, and then how did you get involved with Nick?
So I mean, fast forward to we had a promotion here that was here in Fargo, whatever. Let's say, for the sake of argument, about 4 to 5 years ago.
Who's we?
Called the guy that was based out of Minot, and then sold it to a different promoter here in Fargo. It was called Fully Loaded Wrestling, and Nick originally started coming as a fan.
Yeah.
In fact, Nick actually came to the show, like, I don't know if you remember the name Bruce the Barber Beefcake from back with Hulk Hogan. He used to put people to sleep in a sleeper and then give them a haircut. Anyway, Nick, we did a show at the Red Hawk Stadium, and Bruce the Barber Beefcake ended up giving me a haircut, and I met Nick there as a fan, and so he's came up through just growing up as a kid, as a professional wrestling fan. I'm sure in this whole bit he told you he's got like 100,000 figures at home.
Yes,
and
yeah.
So I mean, he is legit like a huge fan, and so anyway, he and another guy that Nick has the ring and has ring guys that set up and meets with the businesses and does that, and then he's got a partner, Zach, who does the graphics and the online, the social media promotions and that sort of stuff. So they obviously when they started their own promotion when the other promotion folded up here in town, and so they naturally reached out to me, since they knew I'd been doing this forever, and I joined that promotion. So
it is amazing how big and how many things are going on in this town, but then how small it is. And again, so Nick just walked up to you, and everybody just walking up to everybody.
Yeah.
And you just got to make that, and then beautiful things happen. And so our next segment is going to be Fargo Fun. We're going to go do a little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the event we have coming up at the Lights, I believe. So don't go nowhere.